was definitely short, and hopefully for you it was sweet as well. Welcome to Fantasy Baseball Weekly, presented by Levitra, as we take a look around the league to see who's hot and who's not for our fantasy squads. Also, Fantasy Baseball senior analyst Eric Mack will join us fresh from his own all-star trip to San Francisco for the latest on fantasy baseball and look at some hot prospects coming up that may impact fantasy leagues in the second half. The second half is when the men are separated from the boys in baseball, when pretenders give way to the real contenders, and whoever makes the best moves and gets hot at the right time normally hoists the pennant in the big leagues and also in fantasy baseball. The Atlanta Braves were one of the teams always making noise this time of year from 1991 to 2005, making the postseason in each of those seasons. But 2006 found them on the outside looking in for the first time in 15 years. And this year, a June swoon found them losers of 16 of 21 and in third place in the East, and with cornerstones of their dynasty, John Smoltz and Chipper Jones, bickering. But July has been much better to the Braves. They've won 12 of their last 16 to return to second place, just a game and a half behind the front-running Mets, thanks to some great fantasy performances by some unexpected sources. Buddy Carlisle has won 3 straight decisions for the Bravos while giving up 1 or fewer runs in the 3 of his last 4 starts. His shakier performances this season have been in interleague play against American League clubs. Also, Chuck James is looking more like the 2006 Chuck James, who went 11-4 for the Braves with a 3.7 ERA. After a pretty non-inspiring beginning to the 2007 campaign, James has really kicked it into gear, giving up only 2 earned runs in his last 3 outings. He held the Pirates scoreless for 6 innings in his last start, but picked up the no decision, keeping him from his 3rd straight dominating win. And quietly, Andrew Jones is picking up his production. He's back over the Mendoza line as he has raised his batting average 15 points in July. It's probably time to make sure that Andrew Jones is in your starting lineups, especially since he still has very good power numbers with 17 homers and 57 RBI. And the news only gets better for the Braves as John Smoltz looks to come off the disabled list on Wednesday and immediately return to the Atlanta's rotation. He was 9-5 with a 3-point ERA before going on the disabled list before the All-Star break. The Braves are on their way up in the National League, but a team heading the other way in the American League is the Oakland Athletics. The 2006 AL West champs have dropped their last 7 games and are now 11.5 games behind the Angels. Injuries have just been too much for the A's to overcome this season. They've gotten nothing out of would-be ace Rich Harden so far, and he's making his 2nd trip to the DL so far in 2007. He worked only 6 2/3 innings out of the bullpen in his return, but his shoulder still isn't fully recovered, and he's only been able to go 25 2/3 so far this year. The ones that have stayed in the lineup haven't been producing, though. Shortstop Bobby Crosby has but 1 RBI since June 17th and has been held hitless in half of the last 14 games as the Athletics have fallen out of the race. When we come back, senior fantasy baseball analyst Eric Mack will join us for his take on all these trends. Plus, he's got his prospect report. You're watching Fantasy Baseball Weekly, presented by Levitra. Stick around.
When my doctor told me my high blood pressure may have led to my erectile dysfunction, I was surprised. But then he said there was something I could do.
When I found out my diabetes could have led to my ED, I learned there was help.
My doctor told me about Levitra.
Levitra is clinically proven to work for men with ED, even those with high blood pressure or diabetes. Levitra is only for men healthy enough for sexual activity. If you have heart problems or are on alpha blocker therapy, talk to your doctor before taking Levitra. Do not take Levitra if you take nitrates for chest pains, as this may cause an unsafe drop in blood pressure. Side effects may include headache, flushing and stuffy or runny nose. To avoid long-term injury, seek immediate medical help if you experience an erection lasting longer than 4 hours. If you have any sudden decrease in vision, stop taking Levitra and call your doctor right away.
Doctors know Levitra helps treat ED, even in men with high blood pressure.
And in men with diabetes.
Over 1 million men just like me have already taken Levitra.
You should talk to your doctor about Levitra.
The more you know about ED, the more you'll want to know about Levitra.
Welcome back to Fantasy Baseball Weekly, presented to you by Levitra, and we welcome in senior fantasy baseball analyst Eric Mack to the program. And Eric, just before the break, we were talking about John Smoltz returning from the disabled list, but he's not the only older power pitcher out there that's been on the shelf. What about Randy Johnson in Arizona and Curt Schilling in Boston? What's going on with those guys? When are they coming back?
Yeah, 2 guys showing their age in their 40s. Johnson's chronic back issues are career-threatening, but he could pitch with it, and it very well might in the second half at some point. The herniated disc is something he'll try to pitch with as long as the D-backs remain in the race. He said this weekend he's not close, though, so look for an August return and consider him a questionable guy on a start-to-start basis for as long as he holds off surgery. Schilling's prognosis is a bit better. He's planning to throw off the mound Monday, and if his shoulders comes out of that fine, In the coming days, he could pitch a rehab game. He could be an option to return late in Fantasy Week 17, but track his progress through the weekend and pay very close to the reports on his velocity. He said he can pitch with the pain, but he was shut down because his velocity was only in the 80s. Even at 40-something, Schilling should be able to get in the 90s. If he doesn't, it's a signal his shoulder tendonitis will keep him from being his effective self. After missing on his no-hitter, Schilling's stuff dipped into the 80s, and you saw just how hittable he is without that good hard stuff. This is a time to pay very close attention to the radar gun.
All right, well, let's switch it up a little bit. How about the youngsters? Phil Hughes hasn't gone since May 1st, and Homer Paley didn't get recalled up to the Reds Major League team as we expected. What's going on with those guys? Yeah, two prospects going in very different directions right now. Hughes is working his way back on a Double-A rehab assignment. The Yankees have a doubleheader this weekend, and they need 6 starters, but they won't rush their phenom back at this point. Hamstrings are always a tricky proposition, especially for a power pitcher like Hughes who relies on leg drive. The hammy could feel great one start and then act up the next. Consider him out until August at this point. The Yankees will allow him plenty of time to build up arm strength. He's been out a while, and make sure his hamstring is ready for the season's final 2 months. There's great sleeper potential here, so take the flyer now if he was dropped in your league. With Bailey, the situation is not quite as promising. He's proved hittable in the big leagues because he's relied on his fastball due to poor command of his secondary pitches. The Reds sent him to the minors over the All-Star break under the guise he would return on his regular turn and come back when the number 5 starter spot was needed. Well, Bailey was beat up in AAA, and now it's going to be a few more starts before we see him again. All right, well, we'll keep a lookout for him. And what about any hitting prospects?
Yeah, there are a few. One interesting tale of woe for those people who jumped on the reports. Prospect Adam Jones was going to get called up during the All-Star break. A Seattle newspaper reported Jones was going to get installed as the upstart M's right fielder, moving Jose Guillen or Raul Bañez to DH and making the disappointing Jose Vidro an expensive reserve. It all made sense and led to Jones being the most viewed player over the All-Star break and subsequently the most added player. We love the CBS Sportsline fantasy tools at work, but the M's did not cooperate and the newspaper report came out false and Jones stayed in the minor leagues. There's something to watch here, though, because Jones is a budding young star who's tearing up AAA. Also, a note on the break on prospects, Clay Buchholz and Jay Bruce were promoted to AAA after the Futures game. Those are two very elite talents who are a step closer to the major leagues now for us.
All right, great advice as always. Thanks, Eric. That'll do it for us for now. Keep your mouse clicking right here on CBSSportsline.com for everything you need to know in the world of sports. And don't forget to come back Thursday for Fantasy Baseball Weekly Player Show. But for now, if you missed anything here today, stop, refresh, and rewatch. For Eric Mack, I'm Amber Wilson. Have a good week.